Hey, welcome to the stream, everybody. Let's get started. All right. It's Sunday. I missed a couple streams again this week. My week, my streams during the week. There's just been a couple of things going on, and um, it's just made it difficult sometimes during the week. Oh, my daughter, she came to close the door. Um, and she was just standing, and I could see her out of the corner of my eye. I could see her standing. The doors to my office have glass in the windows, and she was just standing there, kind of looking at me with a mean look on her face. It was hilarious. Um, yeah, there's just been a few things going on that I need to get figured out, and uh, those things have been taking higher priority over a lot of other things. If I can be as vague as possible. Once I get everything figured out, I'll be happy to just discuss it with people. But until that happens, um, there's just a lot of things that I have to figure out, and sometimes those things happen very last minute. So, um, am I going to blow up? Some days I wonder, very much so. Um, hopefully not. But yeah, I trying not to be vague, but at the same time, sometimes you have to, right? Um, and once everything's good to go, we'll be ready to talk about it, and things will get back to normal. I do think, just thinking about things, I think I'm going to. Mondays have wound up to be a difficult day. I think I'm going to move. Originally, my streams were Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. I think I'm going to move back to the Tuesday streams. Um, I think right now, Monday and Thursday are often a bit difficult, but I think Thursday will be less difficult going forward, and Tuesday and Thursday will be more likely for things to happen. Um, so, um, Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday are going to be the days I shoot for. If I need to cut back, I may just go Sunday and Thursday, but we'll see. I want to make sure I'm streaming at least 2 days a week, but I really want to keep the three. Anyway, as you guys saw beforehand, normally I've got a lot of this upgrade stuff done, but if you guys were watching the early stuff, um, you saw I had a whole bunch of things to upgrade. Um, I'm just behind on so many things right now. So let's catch up. Let's get some code written, and let's move forward. So we've got Angular, the CLI. It looks like needs to be upgraded, and the schematics. Storybook we'll just do through NCU. Um, the resources PR. The resources PR. Are you? You're gonna have to remind me on that one because I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm not sure. Um, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, there's some really cool stuff coming in 19. Whoa. Uh, let's. That was fun. I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. Um, and that made a little bit of a mess. NPX. Things need to run through PNPM because PNPM does some stuff to the shell. Um, and that's why all that red text scrolled through. Luckily, that caught my attention. But linked signal, yes. Those both have been there's a lot of discussion going on around both of these in the GDE chat too, trying to figure out what are good uses for them. As soon as RC1 of 19 drops, we'll do a stream, and we're going to look at both of these. We're going to look at the derived async, and we're going to take a look at the linked signal stuff. Um, yeah, yes, and there's there's a lot changing in the new version that I'm really excited about. Um, and um, there's a lot of stuff. So as a GDE, we signed some NDAs that we can't talk about things. There's some things that I can't wait to talk to you guys about. Um, but yes, Armin has a great post showing template. Um, can you post that link in chat, and we can talk about that post, just so people are aware of what's coming. Because 19 is going to give us some pretty cool tools. Oh, try to link a post but was filtered. Let me go unfilter you. So here we go. Hmm, interesting. Oh, on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to do it. So thank you for that, Michael. Let me post it. I don't know why it's filtering you. Um, they just changed my entire interface. Is my own stuff getting filtered too? I send it here. Interesting. So I get filtered in my multi-stream chat, but not. Ooh, that's an ugly link. Let me delete that link. Can I delete that link? Let me follow that link so you guys don't have all the um there we go. That's a much better link on the actual Twitter. For whatever reason, it's they've messed with my interface. So I need to figure out what's going on here. But there's a better link. Let me bring this up in the browser. So let's go ahead and pm stack nx migrate schematics. That's going on. We'll bring this up. Doesn't matter which one we bring up. Need to go in and change that setting. Anyway, here's the post that he's talking about. So the user resource allows us to load certain data, get requests, and so we've got this user service they're injecting, right? The user ID is a required input, and then the user resource relies on the input value of the user ID. So there's a request signal that returns this signal. When this signal is raised, then the loader goes, right? This resource then has statuses on it, right? So loading, resolved, error. And then once that comes back, you can see here that the form has linked signals on it. And so these linked signals, when the user resource has data and a full name, this linked signal is going to raise. Really, really powerful stuff. And yeah, very, very powerful stuff. And like everybody right now in Angular writes a whole bunch of boilerplate around this. Right? Having a nice resource that we can use to do certain things with, and then the linked signals. The linked signals are really powerful because they're based on another signal and allow us to grab stuff out of it. So, we will be. What happened there? How did I do that? That was weird. It switched workspaces on me and cleaned me up, or messed me up, cleaned me up. Anyway, we will definitely be going into that stuff as soon as the RC drops because one, I want to be in doing stuff with it, and two, I want to be showing you guys right away, so you're ready for it as soon as it drops. Yeah. Let's see. Michael, been trying to run Alex's branch today locally, but yarn hurts my soul with WSL2. Yarn, yeah. I have mixed feelings about yarn. We use yarn at Build. The project that I set up was originally set up on PNPM, and then they moved it back to a Yarn workspace. And Yarn workspaces have some good stuff about them and some stuff that I really hate. But I guess I could say that about almost anything. There's, there's nothing that's universally, well, I won't say that. There are things that are universally bad, but there are very few things that are universally bad, right? And typically, right, you can say, oh yeah, there's certain things I like and certain things I hate, and that's a great hedge, especially as like a content creator or even like a more senior position like an architect or something like that, right? Sometimes you've got to hedge a little bit, and so I will tell you that of the three, Yarn is my least favorite. I'll go that far. But there we go. We've got everything upgraded here. But I do feel you. Yarn, and the crazy thing is that when you're running Yarn, you're usually running one of two versions, right? You're usually running Yarn 1 or Yarn 4. And there are idiosyncrasies between the two. And Trying to run yarn 1 on a yarn 4 workspace causes messes. Trying to run yarn 1 on a yarn 4 workspace causes messes. And, but I guess the same could be said about npm and pnpm. So not really. Are there really that big of forks? I mean, trying to run npm on old ones will up. I don't know. I'll let it be. Anyway, we are in a good spot. Everything's all upgraded. So let's go ahead and just say that we upgraded our dependencies. We're going to push. And now let's get WebStorm up and we'll take a look at our code. So there we go. So at the end of the last stream, we had done a little bit more. I'm already running NX console. New version of better highlights. 5 plugins to upgrade. Ignore NX console PowerShell. Okay. We'll update those. We're gonna have to restart. But at the end of the last stream, we had created this with grid feature. And we moved the actual grid state into it. We moved the with computed, like the grid computed stuff into it. And we moved our update cells and our patch state, right? And a big reason that we did that, and we can take a look at this while that restarts. Is because of this dependency, right, graph that we had. We wanted to make this dependency more explicit, right? And so instead of using an explicit effect, what we could do instead is we could calculate this stuff, right? So, you know, checking our grid for errors can be computed, but this can also be used to compute whether we've got a win, which also means we don't need this explicit effect either, right? And the arrow's backwards here, right? There's a dependency on the explicit effect would go here. So all of this stuff can also be changed. And this way, cell value is going to drive all of our computed values. And we can get rid of a lot of effects, right? And the effects are a tool that we tend to reach to pretty quickly because we're like, oh, this value needs to change. I need to watch for it to change. And then I need something to happen when it changes, right? I'm beginning to learn that is often that's like my old habits kicking in, right? They aren't necessarily good for me, but they're what I'm used to, and so that's what I go to, right? I like to think that I am principled and not reaching for effects unless necessary. Yet every time I use them, it just feels weird. Well, and a lot of times we can compute state and then use that computed state to compute more state, right? So computed behaves a lot like effect, but it gives us the ability to do a lot of things that we think we need to do in effects, but really should happen in, they should happen in computed. It's tough for me right now to determine when should we do an effect and when should we do a computed. Usually what happens is I'm like, oh, I need an effect, and then I think it through, and I start drawing out dependencies like this, or I look at the NX dependency graph, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't make sense. So that's where that's usually what happens is I start with an effect and then I get rid of it. Um, to your point, it often feels weird, and that's when I start to think about it, right? Um, and the whole reason that we got here is this whole chain, right? And it's not these arrows that are wrong; it's these arrows that are wrong. Um, there we go. And this one, we want an arrowhead that way and none on that side. So now the dependencies are flowing down, which is the way they should go, right, on a graph like this. And we can get rid of some of the confusing stuff that's here. Right? Because we don't necessarily need an explicit effect here. So there we go. So now our stuff looks a lot better. Our dependencies now all flow in the same direction. And we can see that this depends on this and this depends on this. But a change here really shouldn't have to worry about pencil marks or things like that, right? And me updating a cell here, I shouldn't have to know about pencil marks. And so this makes a whole bunch more sense, right? But these were actually being called from update cell value, right? And so we had this ugly had this ugly dependency chain going this way, and I've got my arrowheads going the wrong way again. Right? So we had this ugly dependency chain going this way. And I need arrows again. Right? And so update cell value had to depend on update pencil marks, and update pencil marks depended on up check grid for errors because I was chaining through. Actually, this isn't true. The dependency was actually here, right? And so there was this weird situation where we had things depending on other things that they shouldn't. If I can get this to be a little bit nicer, there we go. Right, and the graph itself is ugly, right? But worse, we've got a potential circular dependency here if something else depends on this, right? So update cell value became a bottleneck also, which is definitely not something we wanted. Grab all of it. There we go. So there we go. So we had this weird situation. We're going to resolve it. The best way to resolve it is to make these computed. And the green shows direct dependencies, right? The orange shows computed dependencies. So log into my JetBrains account. I have enabled two-factor authentication. Yes, I have. It's crazy it's crazy. Just how often I get notifications that hey, somebody else is trying to log into your account. And I imagine you guys are probably all the same way. Um, oh, I should have been doing that on another monitor. What is going on here? This one says I authorized successfully. Let me just restart here really quick. Um, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, um, we're in an okay state. Hey, Marcus, welcome to the stream, man. Good to see you. All right. So the other thing, oh, that's the other thing I wanted to do. Let's go into settings. They put those. That is obviously not what I wanted. That is not what I wanted. Welcome to the Zen sidebar. Then where are my settings? There they are. So when you open a link, show tab previews. I think this is the one we want to change. Let's go ahead and close that. There we go. Now my bottom isn't all full of, now I can swap back. That was getting a little bit frustrating trying to get back here and then seeing everything. But to kind of the point we were talking about earlier, some of these things can be linked. They can be linked signals, and some of these can be resources and things like that. So with Angular 19, we'll probably revisit this, but we may have to wait for signals to catch up, right? The NGRX signals, because I think we can do some impressive stuff here. One thing that's interesting about the new stuff, the new code, the new linked signals and resources, I've been talking to a friend, and she suggested that I should do something that I've been thinking about for a little while. A lot of people seem to complain that Angular is turning into React, right? I'm thinking about doing a stream, just calling it, an old Angular dev fails at React, and let's see if my knowledge of signals and resources and things like that translates to React, right? Like if that's the case, it should translate. I'm very curious. It's been a long time. I think the last time I looked at React was like 13 or 14, maybe. And I don't even know what version of React they're on now. Um, so I think it would be really curious to build something non-trivial, like um, maybe turning some of the stuff that's in Angular into a shared library in Sudoku, and then adding a React project to this mono repo. And then from that React project, trying to rebuild what we've done. 99% of what is possible and adds things that interrupt well with ARCs. Yes, exactly. Uh, no. My so here's the thing, right? If we make the developer experience similar for somebody who understands React, um, like 90%, 80 to 90% of the developers out there React. I don't know, I'm making numbers up, right? But it dwarfs, a lot of other things. If you make it easier for those developers to understand Angular, maybe they'll pick up Angular, right? Or it might be easier to onboard, a React programmer into Angular and vice versa, right? Your skills will translate. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. Um, they both serve their purpose, but beyond that, they both do very, very similar things. And we need to recognize that React and Vue and Swift and all the other frameworks out there, they have things that they do better than Angular. And there are things that we recognize that Angular does better than other things, right? So it's in our best interest to go, hey, they do this better than us. How can we use that? At least that's my feeling, right? Somebody saying that Angular is turning into React doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Um, but anyway, out of the politics, right? Um, that's my flame war that I've started for the day. Um, so here's our grid store. So we've got our grid, we've got our managed, and our undo redo. Um, so if we go take a look at the old store, um, there are some things that we need to fix. Specifically, reset selected. Need to remember where we were. So we took care of the command stack and all of this. This is all in the undo redo stuff. Update selected. We just moved that over. Reset selected. I don't know if we've got that. So this cell value changed, right? We've got this giant effect on cell value where we grab the latest. And if we're in creating puzzle mode, we do certain things. If we're not, then, oh, this is the command stack stuff. Creating puzzle cell. I think we've got most of this in place. Clear old commands is used here. This is more of that. Update command stack is there. Create puzzle cell. That should be here. Actually, we don't have a lot of the puzzle mode stuff in place, so we'll take a look at that here soon. Update pencil marks. That one we probably need to look at. Set region pencil marks, set column pencil marks, set row pencil marks. So each cell has its own pencil mark. Um, and we do it with this values to hide. And I believe the reason I did this is to prevent a lot of recalculations. But we don't need to worry so much about that. We can, um, we'll come back to the pencil marks. The pencil marks should all be calculated on a per cell basis. Um, but we don't have the grid up and running. Well, we can draw it, right? We can go to Excalidraw and draw. Um, so if we take and we draw our grid, right? So just for demonstration purposes, um, we're gonna do this pretty. We're gonna do this pretty simply. And my lines already aren't straight, which hopefully we can fix. They also aren't even, which we can also fix. That's closer. Actually, let's not do that. We can just copy this and paste it here. And then what we can do is make it green and take you. And there we go. So the reason I drew this out is, let's say that we are in this cell right here. Right? So this is our cell. So this row, and we can show that maybe with this and this, right? So this row, and then this column, and maybe that's the wrong shape to use here, but we're going to go with it. And then also, we're going to say this. We're going to send you to the back. So everything else is on top of you. So when we're in this cell and we make a change, the pencil marks across here need to change, the pencil marks across here need to change, and the pencil marks in here need to change, right? So this is 9, well, it's 8 and 16 and 24 cells need to update, right? We don't need to update the entire grid. And that's what the code we were looking at there. With signals, what we can do um, is when this cell changes, we can actually look at the entire grid, right? Because the grid will change with this update. It has to, but not the entire grid changes. So once we've got the grid, we can look at the signal for this row, and then each of the cells in this row can be updated. We can look at the signals for this column, and each of the cells in this column can be updated. And then we can look at the cells here. So I think we can make our pencil marks computed, right, to go along with what we're doing over here. And so this is kind of the way I'm thinking about it in my head, right? Like this cell changes, it causes the entire grid change. And so I want to work through that and see if that's possible. I think the linked signal would be really powerful here, but we don't have those yet. But I want to see where we were. I think I added a comment in here. The solver is going to need a lot of this stuff too. Check grid for win, update win, has errors, valid cell. Update cell value. So we were still here in update cell value. So update cell value, wrote the value here. Reset selected. So here we're writing the cell value, changing whether it's reset selected. What is selected doing here for us? It's not doing anything for us. We just called update cell value. I thought I'd moved all of this. There must be more. It's cell values to hide. Let's just find all my to-dos, right? Did I remove stuff from here? The old store. Part of solver was added. Finish moving this. And I remember moving all, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I remember moving all of that over. That's all here in the grid feature, because we're patching the state with row, column value, and read only. Right, that's our update cell value. it's to a point now where it's difficult to see what's been moved and what hasn't. So I think at this point, what I need to do is start just removing stuff from this file. It's already broken. Um, so the grid, I know I've got that. That can go away. So can that. I don't have game one. Creating puzzle mode, I do have. Um, we don't know if the grid has an error. Selected. Selected. Manage selected. So we do have selected in here. Um, so we do have selected. And I probably should have been doing this early on. Next to focus, do we have focus management in here? Manage selected. Reset selected. I don't think I have focus management in here, so we'll need to figure that out. The command stack is part of the undo redo. That can all go away. Command stack invalid values. I don't think I have that one in place yet. What is this used by? Find usages. So it is used by the solver. Yeah, I don't have that one in place yet. So this is going to be part of the solver. Hello, John Angular. Nice. I like it. Thank you, Burn of Sigma. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So this needs to stick around. The constructor we don't need. Update selected. I believe that's part of the manage selected. Yep, we've got that in here, so we can get rid of that. Reset selected. I saw that in there too. Cell value changed. This is an effect. So here we're updating the command stack, which we did. We're clearing the old commands. So inside of here, is computed state. Current command is computed. Command stack length is computed. With methods, clear old commands. With methods, undo and redo. So we have that. But what we don't have is something, an effect that is watching. I think I need to work through this effect. So that needs to be there. We just saw that we have clear old commands. We also saw that we have update command stack. We don't have create puzzle cell because we looked at our puzzle feature. So if we go take a look at this, right now we don't have the ability to create a puzzle feature, a puzzle cell. So this will need to happen. When a cell value changes, there will need to be some things that need to happen. That's fine. Updating pencil marks we haven't done. This stuff was the stuff that I just drew out, right? So setting update pencil marks, we set the region pencil marks, we set the row and column pencil marks. Um, and then toggle create puzzle mode. I believe we have that. Yep. We can get rid of this. Set create puzzle mode. We don't have that one. So we will need to have a way to create. Oh, wait, no. I think we call that from in here, right? This is just the toggling it, and we're just patching the state. Ink. Svelte 5 came out real hot out of the oven. I don't know what I think about it yet. Apparently gets even faster than React and the like. Um, Angular 18.29 is greater than React. 18.20 is greater than. It's just basic. Oh, Michael. Oh, put that on Twitter, but make sure you put on your flame-proof clothing. um, I haven't looked at Svelte 5. I actually haven't looked at Svelte in a long time. Um, and that's something I should probably update my knowledge on. Um, so Angular Angular has stats that once they moved over to the control flow structures and things like that, there are stats showing that Angular is faster than React. Svelte, right? It's easy to take pot shots at the big, um, what do I want to call it? Like the big target, right? What is going on here? Copilot. My Copilot is probably broken. That's okay. We're not using Copilot right now. So I would like to know, dude, that's an amazing, exactly. There was a live stream from the creators. React for performance is, well, not a thing. And so that's very, so the reason Angular JS, right? Like if you watch this whole, like I've been around for a long time. So I remember like Prototype and MooTools, right? And Prototype, what it did is it used the prototypes of all of the all of the web stuff, and it added its own stuff to those prototypes. Turns out that's a bad idea. So Prototype kind of died. MooTools kind of started to take over, and then jQuery came along, and jQuery was just better, right? $sign everywhere, and we still see $signs even in like Chrome DevTools, and you get like JQ JQ Lite style queries, right? And I don't know why my brain got stuck on that, but right. So even in Chrome DevTools, if you have something selected in the console, you can do like $0 or whatever, and that's what you selected, right? Well, JS names sound made up. There were tons of memes back in the day where you could pick a random word and Google it, and there was probably a JavaScript library using that word. So Svelte 5 runes is a lot like jQuery. Yeah. jQuery was just better. The problem that jQuery had is it wasn't a framework. It was very much just a library that you could use to query and update the DOM, and then a whole bunch of plugins were added to it that would allow you to do stuff, right? Very similar to React. But because it wasn't very structured, and you could pick libraries and stuff like that, every jQuery project wound up being like spaghetti. Every jQuery project wound up being difficult to maintain. And I say there were definitely jQuery projects out there that were not like this, right? But for the most part, anytime you worked in jQuery, you were working in spaghetti. Um, jQuery is what React thinks it is. Anyway, along came Knockout. And Knockout is what I was moving to from jQuery because Knockout had the idea of computed, it had the idea of dependencies, it had the idea of two-way binding and all of this stuff, right? And one day I was talking to a friend, I was like, oh man, Knockout's so amazing. He's like, yeah, but have you heard about this thing called Angular? I was like, Angular, that's weird. I was like, why do they call it Angular? It's like because they use the Angular brackets on it. I was like, oh, okay, I'll go check it out. Went and checked it out. This was Angular JS 0.8 was when we were doing this. I moved all my Knockout code to Angular 0.9 when it released because I liked Angular JS so much, right? Angular JS was amazing until you started dealing with $scope, $watch, right? It had its pitfalls. And those pitfalls made it so that it was difficult to make changes to it. And that's where React came along, and React was faster, and it used JSX, and it was easier to understand, and you didn't have $watch, and you didn't have all this stuff, and a lot of people moved to React, right? And Angular saw kind of the writing on the wall, and that's where Angular 2 came about, and they got rid of the old Angular JS, and they switched to Angular 2. That was a huge schism in the community, right? Because Angular JS was not compatible with Angular 2. And so if you wanted to keep up with Angular, there was a whole bunch of stuff that you had to do. And people tried to write tools and stuff, and it just often didn't work. And that was a huge pain point. We've still got people, like, the whole reason Hero Devs exists is there are projects that are so big that they really don't know how to move away from Angular. So Hero Devs comes in and provides a service that allows people to stay on the old versions of Angular, and they'll give them bug fixes and security fixes and things like that. Angular JS Lab in college, yeah. Backbone was another one, right? jQuery 1,000 lines of Perl HTML mismatch. Exactly, Furno Sigma, right? You know what we're talking about. You've seen this stuff, right? And Angular JS added some structure. React came along and made it better, right? Angular 2 was like, or Angular is like, oh no, React is definitely doing things better. We've got to catch up. And Angular 2 came about, and that's where we are now. And that's why Angular promises backwards compatibility between versions, right? Major upgrades. Granted, you can't go in and just upgrade like an old Angular 2 all the way to 18 because the changes are significant enough between 2 and 18 that you can't do that upgrade. You can go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way up to through 18, right? And you're going to have to make fixes along the way because of changes, right? And certain libraries don't exist anymore. People stop maintaining them. There's just, typically on your upgrades, you're least likely to get stuck by Angular. Maybe on the move to Ivy, you might have some stuff to do, but usually Angular has upgrade paths for you that they'll do for you. The prodigious son who became conceited and chubby. Yeah. And that, yes. React is in a tough position. And this happens to every library that becomes the de facto standard, right? jQuery probably saw the writing on the wall that most devs weren't going to write jQuery, even though if you go out there and you look, a large portion of JavaScript is still serving jQuery, probably more than the big three, like React, Angular, and Vue combined, right? There's still probably way more jQuery than those three combined, right? But we still talk about React, right? And most people don't learn jQuery anymore. And jQuery probably saw this coming early. Actually, I know they did. I was just talking to a friend who's been around as long as I have, who has worked on the browsers and has friends all over the industry, right? Um, and he was talking about being at a jQuery conference where they were all sitting around. And we were talking about this for a different reason, because as devs get towards the end of their career, especially like public devs, you'll start to see them pull more and more out of the spotlight, and you'll see less and less of them. And we were just talking about that. And I made a comment that I was like, with the cancel culture and stuff that goes on now, I have to be really careful about what I say, right? Like, one of the things I used to love discussing was politics, and I would discuss politics with anybody. I don't do that anymore. I can't. It's too dangerous of a minefield for somebody who creates content to discuss their politics, right? There's a lot of other things like that, right? And it doesn't matter which side of the fence, or even if I sit exactly in the middle, that doesn't matter, right? Somebody's going to take offense with that, and it causes problems, right? And so I was like, cancel culture is probably a big reason, but he's like, no, this was even happening way back when. People don't want to jeopardize their legacy, right? What we remember of them. They don't want to jeopardize that by saying something towards the end of their career. But he was talking about sitting around at a jQuery conference, and everybody kind of saw the writing on the wall with Angular and React. And they knew that nobody was really going to be learning jQuery, and all these skills that they had learned, and now they've got to, move into other places. React is kind of in that difficult position, right? They own the majority of the market. That takes them out of the innovator's position and puts them strongly in the I don't know how to call it. I was trying to call it like maintainer's position, but it takes them out of the innovator's position, and they have to maintain compatibility because there's so much that relies on what they've written, right? And if they break something, they're likely to break way more than other libraries, right? The person who can innovate the most is the small project that nobody's heard of, right? They can innovate over and over and over again. And the problem with that is that you've got these big things that have to, right? You start having to add in everything to your, as you get bigger and bigger, people want more and more from you. You have to start adding in more and more, but you can't innovate and break things, right? And you have to maintain that stability. But then you've got this small guy out here, right? Like Svelte, right? Svelte has nowhere near as many users as React, right? And so they can go in and they can do things like you're talking about, right? For Sigma. And they can innovate. And eventually there's going to come along a library that's going to innovate enough that people on React are going to go, that makes sense, right? And this is what happened with AngularJS, right? React came along, and they were the small guy. They were innovating. And suddenly everybody's like, well, for me to move to the new version of Angular, I've got to do a rewrite. For me to move to React, I've got to do a rewrite. I like what React is doing. I really hate the fact that Angular is forcing me to do a rewrite. So, they pick up the small guy. And now the small guy becomes huge. And now we start having to pack more and more and more into it, right? And that becomes bloated, like you're talking about for Sigma. And it's just kind of this cycle that happens, right? When you get as many gray hairs as I have, you'll see this cycle over and over again, where as you become successful, you have to pack more and more and more stuff into it. Everybody's saying, oh, they're bloated, oh, they're slow, oh, they're this. The new guy comes along, everybody's like, oh, the new guy is amazing. And everybody moves to the new guy, right? But the new guy doesn't have this that React had. And so the new guy adds this thing that React had. And then, it doesn't have this, right? And suddenly the new guy starts to get slower and slower and more bloated, but they can't innovate anymore because they've got to maintain that stability. And so then you get people out on the fringe who are innovating, and eventually, right, it's just going to be this cycle over and over and over again. And it's just the reality of what it is. Um, Aston Martin designed cars instead. Exactly. jQuery 4 just came out. Checkmate Angularist. jQuery 4. I haven't looked at jQuery since 2.9. I didn't even realize they were making new major versions of jQuery. That's crazy. But anyway, right? Moving a monorepo from 8 to 9 on Ivy was the worst library breaking jump. The dropping of NGCC wasn't that bad. Yeah. Only pros can do Angular 3. There's only one pro out there that I know is doing Angular 3. And I don't know many people that are on his level. So, yeah. If you guys ever get a chance to sit down with Chow, take the opportunity and just let him talk. He's going to teach you so many amazing things. And the crazy thing about Chow is he's probably already looked at what you're doing and he has ideas on what you're doing, and he'll probably give you good ideas for what you're doing. Is an Angular 3 like COBOL? I love it. Reset grid. I don't think I've got that in there. We'll look at it later. Command stack. We've got this done. Update grid. I haven't written any code yet today. Luckily, I've still got an hour. This is the solver. We haven't done anything with the solver. Unwind bad decision is also the solver. Set invalid values for new command. This is also the solver. Set region values to hide for cell. What does this do? Region values to hide. Oh. This is looking at all of the values in the region. I think this can be computed as well. So the reason that I did that was, say we make a change here, right? It had the possibility of cascading a whole bunch of other changes, right? Right now, we calculated that this is 24 changes, but not really 24, because we can take this is really only 4 changes here, right? The region is 4 changes. If we allow the row and the, so when I make a change here, say I put a 1 here, in updating the pencil marks, I remove 1s from this row. I remove 1s from this row for available pencil marks. But I don't have to go back through for this region and remove 1s for everything here. I really only need to look at these 4, right? And I think that's going to be the way it is regardless of where we are, right? Like even if we're here, we would still remove, for the row, we would remove this and this. For the column, we would remove this and this, which then just leaves 2 cells here and 2 cells here. So yeah, and then if we're down here, we would just invert this, right, for the region. And then moving across, it's just really moving things around. Hopefully that made sense. It makes sense in my brain. We've been constant nerds tonight today. What are we creating? What I'm doing is I'm trying to move. What I want to do is use xState for the Sudoku game. So this Sudoku game, if you go back and look through, this is the very first thing I ever streamed, was building this Sudoku game. And as new things come out, this Sudoku game is kind of the way that I can show new capabilities of Angular or new ideas for Angular and things like that. Art. I like it, Michael. But the nerd sniping is fine. I actually like the nerd sniping. It helps. But so this is part of the pencil stuff. So we'll worry about that later. Set column values. This is also pencil stuff. Set row values. That's pencil mark stuff. Check grid for win. We definitely don't have that. Update game one. We definitely don't have that. Check grid for errors. I know we don't have that. Update has error. Well, if we don't have errors, update cell value or cell valid. And we're using the update cell valid to add classes to the cell to display errors, right? So again, if we go back and we look at this, right? Say that there's a 1 in this cell and I put a 1 in this cell. And let's say that there's a 1 in this row and a 1 in this column. I need to mark all of these things in red to show that they're all invalid. So what I think we can do, because again, really, if I put an invalid value in, we only need to update the invalid things in rows, columns, and regions. And again, that's only 24 checks. So if we can keep that from cascading, right? 24 checks is not that expensive of a thing to run. And so updating 24 signals, because this Sudoku game is really 81 signals, right? 9 by 9. So if we can keep the cascade out of, all of the stuff here that doesn't have, a diamond in it, we're updating a very small portion of the grid, right? Probably winds up being close to, what is that close to? 24 cells. So it's a ninth plus a ninth plus a ninth. Is that really what it is? A third? Is that really a third? Maybe. Close to it at least, right? Because a third would be 27 cells. So we're affecting 9 plus, 6 plus 6 is 21 cells. I don't know. How do I store the cells? The cells are stored in a 2x2 grid. Doing an SAT solver in Angular. That would be cool. We do have a solver built into our Sudoku, and it uses wave function collapse to do the solver. It's a matrix. Well, it's not really. I mean, it's offset based array, right? So this is 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, right? Through 0, 8, and then this is 1, 0 down through 8, 0, right? So it's an offset based. It's not really a matrix. So it's definitely an offset based multidimensional array. So, I don't think we need to do a matrix here, and maybe you might have some good ideas for this, but a matrix might be, if only you had to worry about cache on this. Well, and the thing is, I am worried about cache, right? Because I don't want, like, if I'm not careful, say I make a change here, I cascade it through the entire grid, which causes a change here, which I cascade through the entire grid, which causes a change here, which cascades through the entire grid. right? I could easily make this a mess, right? And that's why I spend time thinking about things like this, right? Where we draw this out, um, and look at what do we actually need to worry about, and not like 81 cells is not that expensive, um, but you start getting into like O(n) squared on 81, and 81 squared starts to become a big number, right? And really, when we talk big O notation, we don't like O(n) squared is, as n approaches infinity, is not really that much different than O(n) cubed or O(n) to the fourth, right? But for 81, O(n) cubed may as well be infinity. O(n) to the fourth is definitely infinite, right? That's probably going to kill my browser. I don't even know, what that number would be. Um, O(n) squared. Well, and that's what I'm trying to avoid, right? Is an O(n) squared. Like, what would suck? The worst way to do this, right, would be if I make a change in this cell here, I iterate over the entire grid, and then I move to the next cell and iterate over the entire grid, right? That would be an O(n) squared operation. And brute forcing some of these checks, right? I could make O(n) squared. You know, like if I wanted to check in this row if things were, what are my matching numbers? Um, the brute force solution would be to O(n) square this, right? And go through the entire grid. But really, when you come back and you think about it, one cell only changes at a time, and so we really only need to worry about 24 cells, right? Um, well, not even the solver algorithm. Not even the solver algorithm. The solver algorithm actually winds up being pretty simple. But like, say I want to update the pencil marks, right? And the pencil marks are like the little hints that you get that show you, hey, you've already used one in this row or in this region or in this column, right? If I put a one here, I want to remove one from all of the pencil marks here and here and here, right? But also, me putting a one here, I want to check the errors here, here, and here. If I go naive on this, right? Exactly, right? Logical, right? And this is the kind of stuff. Um, this is the kind of stuff that I enjoy, right? The architectural thinking, right? Because the naive brute force solution could easily be O(n) squared, right? Um, check every cell against every cell in the grid. That's the naive solution, right? Yeah, this is the kind of stuff I love too, right? Um, and absolutely, the naive solution would be O(n) squared. It would be probably very unlikely to make errors, right? Because as I move through, I would update. So I would check this cell and update everything in the grid based on this cell, and then check this cell and update everything in the grid, right? You do the sum check? I don't do the sum check. I could do the sum check, right? Um, that would be a quick way to check a row. And the match check. I do match checks across rows, columns, and within grids. So like to check if the game is won, really I just check if there are any errors anywhere, and then if every cell is filled in. If every cell is filled in, um, so the sum check and the match check, I'm gonna have to, maybe we'll upgrade some of our algorithms here, because I guarantee some of my stuff is pretty naive. It was written a while ago, and it was written to be somewhat quick, but I didn't dig in and be like, what are the best algos for a Sudoku game. But we could easily check a row and see, if a row is filled out, it has to add up to, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4 is 10, 15, 21, 28, 36, 45, right? So a row has to add up to 45, a column has to add up to 45, and a region has to add up to 45. And That's a pretty quick check, right? Well, and really, if we summed the entire array and it adds up to exactly 45 times 9, what is that? 360 plus 45 is 405. So if the entire grid adds up to 405, then, and we have no dupes anywhere in the entire array, yeah, it should be pretty quick. Because it's just iterating through everything and adding it, right? That's just a simple reducer. You could reduce the grid down to its sum, and then check for dupes. If there's any dupes anywhere in a row or a column or a grid or in a region, and dupe checks is pretty quick, right? So, well, actually, all we would need to do is we really just need the sums of the rows, the columns, and the regions, and then the sum of the entire grid. And I don't even need to dupe check in that case. Um, JS is a garbage collected language. JS handles memory pretty well, but running it in a browser opens itself up to potential memory leaks because the browser may not dispose of elements, and so if you attach memory to those elements, that memory could live on. Um, yeah, those ints would be all on the stack. So yeah, yeah. Well, I imagine it would all be stack, right? I don't think, and this is me. This is you're definitely nerd sniping me here, right? But if we look, there's really only 81 values, right? Um, and then there's 9 rows and 9 columns, so that's another 18. And then so 108 values would need to be stored plus the one for the grid. That's 109 values. And we can guarantee that the game is won, right? If every row adds to 45, that means that there's no dupes. There can't be dupes. If every row adds to 45, every column adds to 45, and every section adds to 45, and then the entire grid adds to 405, there can't be dupes, right? Um, yeah, it probably is all heap allocated. Yes, it would be easier for garbage collection, right? Like numbers are primitives, but everything's an object in JS, and they all have pointers to other things, right? For the garbage collection, just like you said. Um, so you're probably right that they're heap allocated, but I don't know, what the actual runtime does with things if there are optimizations around arrays and things like that, right? Um, but really, to solve this entire grid, or to check if this entire grid is solved, if the entire thing adds to 405, if every row and every column adds to 45, and then every section adds to 45, and we may not even need to do all of that. I'd need to do the math to figure that out. But I think we could pretty much guarantee that we have no dupes in that case, right? Because like one way to check that out would be, right, I could make every row add to 45 by going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? All the way down. But then this first column doesn't add to 40. None of these columns would add to 45, right? They would all be 9 times whatever their value is, right? So this last one, right? So instantly we fell there. But here we would also be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? So that's 6 times 3, that's 18. So this would sum to 18. So this would fail. this would fail. But even though all the rows added to 45, and even though the entire grid added to 405, it broke, right? And so, we could go through the same exercise here where, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 here in this region, in this region, in this region. The regions now all sum to 45. The grid sums to 45. But I don't even need to do the dupe checks because, again, right, this would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This would sum to 18, right? Well, no, it's this way, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So these rows top rows would all sum to 18. That would fail immediately, right? So I don't need to do the dupe check. And even if I did, even if I did, what is it, to get to 405, right, we would need, what is it, 405, so we would need 45 nines, right? So even if I filled 5 cells with nines, the grid would sum to 405, but the first region would fail, the first row would fail, the first, right? These would all fail. So I think we could do everything by checking the sums. We don't even need to do dupe checking. And you definitely sniped me there. So we can definitely upgrade our algos and they would be faster, right? To your point, sums are faster. But I don't know if I need to because we're already checking the rows, columns, and regions for errors, for dupes, right? So really, all I need to do is if there's an empty cell anywhere, the grid, the game isn't won. If all the cells are filled, but I have an error anywhere, the game isn't won. And I need to do those checks anyway for the highlighting that we're doing. So I can just rely on those checks. And the caching you're talking about for Inno Sigma is given to us through the signal store because the signals, we use computed signals. And so when this value changes, we can cascade that change through these areas. Yeah, right. A simple sum is a good way to go if you're just checking, if you're just given a random grid and say, hey, does this win? The simple sum would be the way to go. Right? But if you've got a game where you're tracking a whole bunch of other state, we can just piggyback off that state. So yeah, but yeah, definitely some good, amazing sniping, right? Updating cell valid. I don't think I have that in place. I don't think we're going to use that. Update cell value. This really only is used in 2 places. So in the change cell value where we also check for errors and we check for win and we update the pencil marks, right? This has all these dependencies that we're solving with this diagram, right? So update cell value will update the cell value, but then we can update the pencil marks and the grids and that, right? So the only thing that's here that I need to think about is what do we do in the case of where we've backtracked? We need to change the command stack, right? But I think we handle that with the update cell value anyway. But our unit tests will catch this too. That's the other benefit here. Is our new grid store. we can unit test this, we can unit test this, we can unit test this, and we can unit test this. And so we'll know that the individual pieces work. And so our store itself will only need to concern itself with the integration between these. And I'm not sure what tests would exist there, but we can look at them. Would you accept the final solution automatically, or would you hit a submit button? It automatically accepts the final solution the way it works right now. So as soon as you enter the right value in the end, it pops up the win, the win stuff on the side, but the grid isn't disabled at that point in time. There were some other things that I thought about as features, and we might add them with the Angular 19 to show some of the stuff we can do there, like adding a timer that would start when you click a start button, that would start when you enter a value. You could pause it, but if you entered a value after pausing, the timer would start as soon as you entered a value, and things like that. Or potentially, if you pause it, we would obscure the grid. Who knows, right? Things like that. That would add some complexity, but using like linked signals and things like that, we can do some pretty cool stuff. So anyway, where were we in here? So we looked at update cell value. We looked at, did we? Check grid for win. So the update game one, right? Game one just sets a Boolean value that we can calculate in the new way, checking the grid for errors. Really, if any of the rows or regions or columns has errors, then updating has error. Update cell valid, we did look at that. Update cell value, we were just looking at that, and this is done. So navigate to cell. I don't think I have this in place. This has to do with when you press like an arrow key or a directional key, how do we jump to the cell where they can do the input? I don't think that is done yet. Update next to focus, that is part of navigating. And then like the undo and the redo, we finished. And I'm definitely not going to, well, maybe I will check in these edits after. Well, I won't. We're going to remove this file. Change current command index is part of the undo redo. Change cell value is the stuff that we were just talking about. Update selected from navigation. So this is what happens when they hit a direction. So we've got these helper functions, in this direction, what's the next cell that they can move to? There were actually some bugs that we fixed with component tests. Navigate to cell is part of that. The right function we don't need anymore. Analyze errors will be there. Check row for errors will be there. Mark cell with errors. Check column for errors. Get column to analyze. Check region for errors. Items to take. This was our analyzer is actually a general solution. The items to take would allow us to do different grid sizes, which was a fun thing to work out. But these are all outside of the store, and they're helpers that we use in the store. So I think we're in a good place. So we can go back up to the top. And let's just look at what we are missing. Update next to focus. Find next value. So the old store has a game one. I think this is going to be the last thing we do. Has errors next to focus. We'll do the navigation later. Cell value changed. What I think we want to do, we'll come back to creating puzzle cells. I think we want to move into pencil marks right now. And I've got 25 minutes to talk about this, or to figure this out. So let's shut these down. And in our grid store, let's get our pencil marks in place, right? So we want to add with methods. And then with methods takes the state, and then it returns an object that has methods on it, right? So this is where we are. My Copilot is kind of messed up, and I'm not sure. Oh. I didn't pop anything up anywhere. I'm going to restart this and just see what happens. I may have been in a bad state after the license stuff, right? So we'll see if Copilot comes back to life. No, it doesn't. Not signed into GitHub. Log into GitHub. There we go. Now we're ready. Okay. Anyway, so we're wanting to do pencil marks, right? So I want to think about pencil marks a bit differently. Currently in the grid, let's take a look at our pencil marks, right? So this relies on the grid. We get a cell value in, which is a value change. So when we get a new value, this needs to update our pencil marks. We've got the pencil marks for a row. We got a pencil marks for a column. We've got the pencil marks for a region. I go look at set. So we set the pencil marks for every cell. So currently every cell has their own pencil marks. We've got this cell state. And our cell state has a value, whether it's valid, whether it's read only, the row, the column, the region, the values to hide, and the column values to hide, and the region values to hide. I think these can be calculated. Like valid could be calculated on the cell state. is read only, can't be, because that's set by whether it's part of the puzzle or it's something that they can change. The row and the number can't be calculated. The region could be calculated, but do I want it to be? And the way the region works right now is this is region 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? I think we do some math to set the region. So it could be calculated. Row values to hide, column values to hide, and region values to hide. I believe these could all be calculated. They don't need to be set. And if we base them on the right thing, they won't cascade. And what I mean by cascade is if I change this value, really, I only want these computed values to change and these computed values to change. And these, I don't want anything that doesn't have a diamond in it to change at all. So you're checking all rows and columns on every cell update, if I understand it correct. Would you? No, I don't. I don't ever want to check all rows and all columns and all regions. So when this value changes, really I only need to check this row if it's valid, this row if it's valid, and this if it's valid. And then if anything is invalid here or here or here, then I know the entire puzzle is invalid. I don't have to check anything that isn't affected by this change. Right? And so the win condition is no errors, right? So if I've got any errors here or here, then I know the win condition is false. But what I'm trying to do is, so like I want the row pencil marks to be updated here. If I put a 1 in here, I want all the ones to disappear across this row and all the ones in this column and all the ones here. I don't need to check any of this rest. So really there are let's start with rows, right? As we think this through. So if we think this through, this cell changes, right? So we've got our cell. Let's draw it in the same color here. You know what? Let's change the color here just to help. So we can see the dependencies, right? For our computed. So if we draw this out, our grid changes, right? Which depends on the cell change, right? So this cell change, and we'll draw this in. We can draw these colors in white, right? So boom. So this cell changes. The grid depends on this cell changing. We also have. Whoops. Let's go back to white here. And then we'll. you are white to represent the grid. We'll get a new one. We'll draw it in blue. And so that causes the row and just that row to change, right? So all the pencil marks in that row would update. So this is the dependency chain that we're looking at right now. The next one, once we solve this one, would be the column update, right? And then the one after that would be the region update. Right, and so these are dependents. These are signals. So we'll need rows. We'll need a way to know that when the grid changes, that this row changed, so that we know to update these signals. Well, we don't even need to update the signals, but we need a way to calculate the signals based on the grid changing in the row. So I think the first thing we need to do is figure out how to get rows, because that will give us a dependent signal, right? Or a signal that we can depend on. So when this changes, the grid will change, and then the calculation for the row will change. And then from here, the pencil marks can change, right? Because we'll know that this row has changed based on this dependency change, right? The cell value is causing the whole grid to change, and then our rows are based on the grid, our columns are based on the grid, and the section is based on the grid, and then these can all update, and we'll do, I don't know, we'll do this for like pencil marks, right? So here, yep. So this is kind of our dependency chain, and all of these will follow this. So there will be only in the beginning we'll do the rows first, right? So the dependency chain will go this way. So the cell will change, which causes the grid to change, which causes the row that we're dependent on to change, which causes the pencil marks to update. And what I want to see, and we'll do some testing on this, both manually and we'll write some unit tests around it. But I want to make sure that when this to this happens, that that we don't go through everything and update every. So yeah, okay. Should be fairly simple to do. So what we need to do is go into our grid store. Our cell state, we really don't need this anymore. This is what we're going to be calculating. So this row values to hide corresponds to this. So this will be computed. This will be computed. And then the grid is just a deep signal. So in our grid store, what we want to do is be able to get rows. And that's not a method. That's going to be a computed. So with computed, again, we're going to have our state. And this might be Excited that deep signals are available with deep computed and NGRX 18.1. Yes, absolutely. We're going to be relying on the deep computed with deep signals. Hoping the framework adopts it officially. I give an example on recent issue asking for it. I love that. Yeah, we're going to be relying heavily on deep signals here. So our rows are going to be computed. Need to pull that in. And so to give back a row of cells, we need to figure out from the state we need the selected row and the so we need the const current row, and that will be the state selected row. But is in selected. Selected is a cell state, right? The state selected row. Can't find, what does it say? Property row does not exist on type. Signal. Really? Oh, it wants me to do it this way. Really? That is hideous. um, and that's not right. This is definitely not right. Um, that is for sure not right. Yeah, the fallbacks for, yeah. The other day I was doing a reactive form to signal most of the state for and hooked one field into the type ahead. Literally doing anything on the form caused the type ahead to fire. Oof. Yeah. Yeah. Because of the way the signals are, fallbacks for undefined stuff is yucky. Yeah, and usually in that case, and that's, remember when we went back and we did the optional stuff? Optional would have been amazing there. And maybe we'll introduce optional as part of this rewrite, right? But rows really should be state.grid map map. And here we're getting the cell state. Index number array. If I look at the grid, I need to go look at the cell state. Or the grid. And this is something that I messed up all the time. Isn't like this. Duplicated code fragment. I probably got that duplicated somewhere. We'll figure that out. Grid state. So row and then column. So the convention we used is the first is the row and the second is the column. And actually, even in here, I think I've got something to get the rows, right? So I don't have to think through this too much. Is it at the bottom? Get next cell state, partial cell state, get next cell, find next cell, get cell values to hide, get region to analyze, check region for errors, get column to analyze, check column for errors, mark cell with errors, check row for errors. Grid row. So yeah, the first one is the row. Um, so really, we don't, well, here we can just grab a row and we can just do row, right? That's going to give us our rows. Um, columns is a little bit different. So here we can go with columns, and that's going to be computed. Did that actually do what I wanted? Ooh, that's ugly. That's very ugly. That didn't do what I wanted. Um, so the column index, what we really want to return is state dot grid. Um, we grab the column index, and then how did I do it in the old store? Navigate, analyze, check row for errors, because here we can just do that. Check column for errors, get column to analyze. So we take in a column number, a cell state, or a grid, and we do grid.map row column. Building the columns is kind of ugly. Really kind of ugly. Because we basically loop through everything. This is our column index. And this is state.grid.map. Wait, does that work? I don't think that works. So, well, for one thing, this isn't good. This is not good at all. Rows is easy. And this is our convention, right? So like when we iterate over our rows is easy because we're just right. The iterator is just giving us this row and we go down. What I'm trying to do, I've created an ON squared. What really should happen is to do columns. So column 0 is 0, 0, 1, 0 all the way down. So what we want to do is we want to grab the grid because that's what's going to create our computed. Um, so what we can say is we can say that const um, grid equals state.grid, boom, and that's going to create our grid. And so now to create our rows array, what we need to do is we need a for loop. So we can do for let I equals 0, I is less than 9, I plus plus. I don't like that. I really don't like that. This is not doing what it looks like it's doing. This is only creating a single column. And then it's returning out of it, which is ugly in and of itself. I also don't know what's going on here. That matches up there. Oh, we're missing one more of those. And one more of those. And one more for good measure. And there we go. And this is telling me that not all code paths return a value, which is absolutely true. Um, what I don't want to do we do this. I think this might be the smarter way to go, but if we go rotated equals computed, um, and then we're going to do this, state.grid map. what I want to do, and it might be, it has to be computed. Rotated has to be computed. Um, let's see what it came up with. What is going on here? Boom, boom. You, and then you and you. There we go. So it took the grid and it's mapping the row. Then it's taking the row and mapping the cell. Returning the cell. What the heck? Oh, that's weird, but not what I want. I definitely want to map it, but so my notion of a rotated grid is this, right? Right now, this is 0, 0, 0, 1, all the way out through 0, 8, right? If instead we take, and this is 0, this is 0, 1, all the way down, this becomes 1, 0, 2, 0, right? And so essentially what we've done is we've flipped the X and the Y, or the I and the J, right? So here in a normal traversal, I would be the rows, boom. But in a flipped traversal, J would be what comes first, which would be the columns, which would allow us to traverse across columns. And so I'm trying to think, how would I do that? This doesn't do it. What this is actually doing is it's taking the value and subtracting it from 10, which is weird. I don't know why it's trying to rotate the cell value. But I don't know if I can do this with an I or J. What I probably need to do, um, I need to do const grid equals state dot grid. Um, and then rotated grid is that. And I'm going to need some curly braces around stuff. Um, so there's my grid. My rotated grid can actually be and then let I equal 0. Yep. Rotated grid I push grid J comma I. That I think is what I want. And then I can return rotated grid. And I think this could be done in a reducer. But I want to, why doesn't it like this? Type never. Um, so this will be cell state. Boom, boom. So essentially what we've done here is we've flipped the grid on itself. And I think we can do this with a reducer. Um, so now that I've thought through how I want this to happen, now we can take a look at reducing it, right? So we can do rotated grid 2, computed, boom, that. And what we can do is we can do state.grid reduce. And here, instead of ACC, we can think about this as rotated grid and then row. And this is going to do some math here. And then here, we just need to pass in an empty grid. Need a comma here. Right. And actually, I'm in the wrong place. I don't need a comma here. I need. We've got the rotated grid. We start with an empty grid, but really, here we could do it doesn't like this. We can just say as cell state that. Matches up there. Why did we get a semicolon? So now you go there. Boom. And now our rotated grid is that, our row is that. And so now we can say row dot for each. And here we can say cell. So we can loop through each cell. And then we can say rotated grid. And here we can say, we can call this column. No, we can just call this cell. That's fine. So for our cell, rotated grid cell dot column comma cell dot row equals cell. Boom, and then we need to return rotated grid. So that's our reducer that's going to go through it. So, and really we could even, so our accumulator has the previous value, the current value, and the index. Um, and so we don't even need that. So here we could go row index, right? If we wanted, but we don't need it. Um, we are using row here. Um, so what this is doing, right, is we're using a reducer because the grid naturally goes through each row. We're going through each row, and then in each row, we're taking each cell and we're making the column the first part, in the row the second part. And so now if we do a for each on the rotated grid, then we're going through by column. So hopefully that makes sense, because that is going to allow us to take this out. And again, these are based entirely on the grid. So one thing I need to do is just add another with computed. And this with computed is going to take state and it's going to return. I want to move the rows down into here, even though I don't need to. And then my columns be computed based on state and the rotated grid mapping the columns. So what we've done, and my concern using computed here is that we're going to redo every column. So we're going to go through the entire grid. Anytime the grid changes, we're actually going to do all of these again. We're going to go through everything. Anytime the grid changes. The other thing is these methods probably need to exist after the computed. Maybe, I don't know yet. So now we've got rows and columns being computed. So now we need to get, we'll just start with one thing I know is that these are definitely not going to go into pencil marks. These are going to go into the actual grid. So the pencil marks, if we look at the old store, when the cell value changes, so the row values to hide, right? So we're actually updating every cell with the row values to hide. And so this will be calculated. Set the row values to hide. Um, what we need to do is do some navigation because we need to know the current selected cell. Um, actually, we don't. We don't. We can compute this off of the cell. Um, so we can go with computed here state, boom, um, and I'm beginning to think that I was smart before, which is a weird place for me to be. um, because I'm trying to figure out. So what I'm thinking is like pencil marks is going to be computed, right? Um, and it's going to be based on um, we can say, hey, const current cell um, we can't grab that. What we want this to be based on is like if we do state.grid dot, we can't do that, right? Because state.grid is that. And then we do dot for each row. But at this point, we're out of the deep signal, right? The type of row is a cell state array. And so like I don't have a signal for each cell. I don't have a deep signal for that. So what I was thinking won't work. Um, but we do need these rows and columns. Um, so update cell is going to have to patch the state. But the the problem is, I thought we were more granular, right? If we had a signal at the cell level, then we could figure things out. Um, we don't have a signal at the cell level, but I don't know that I want a signal at the cell level. Like all of this works, we have a signal at the cell level. The signal stops at the grid level. Um, but we could get a signal at this that would be pointing to the cell that changed. Um, so basically, we could create an event that happens at this level. Um, so we need to think about this a little bit differently. Um, so this is still fine. We can update this cell value, but update cell value. These can't be driven by cell value because cell value isn't a signal. They need to be driven by something else. So update cell value. Hmm, I'm trying to think this through. What I think needs to happen is update cell value will have an event. So this can be cell updated, right? Um, so update cell value and then raise an event, the cell updated event, that then these can watch for. Um, I think that might work. So in the initial state, we need we need a method. So here, with methods, and here this will just be notify. This can be cell updated, right? And this can be just row number, column number. We aren't using state at this point, but just in time to type some slurs and get me banned. Yeah, I only if I read them out loud, right? All I have to do is ban you. So what needs to happen here is we need some callbacks, basically, or a way for this. I need to think through this. Because essentially what needs to happen is there just needs to be yeah, it's not simple code, and that's why I chose a Sudoku game, is because it takes some time to think about. Um, but what really needs to happen is here in the initial state, um, we just need a signal, or not a signal, because it needs to be an observable. Um, so here, this last cell updated is a new subject, and it's going to be row, which is a number, and then column, which is a number. Um, so here in the grid state, we just need last cell updated, which is a subject of that. And then it's a row and a column. And then in our feature, cell updated, and now just say state dot last cell updated next row and column. Oh wow. because it's a signal, but I don't want this to be a signal. Um, but I kind of don't think there's a way around it with the signal store. I'm gonna have to talk to somebody about this. Yeah, the signal store is it's a way to interact with signals in nested signals. So you can take an object um, structure and turn it into what they call deep signals. So any part can be chained to, and you can use that as a signal, or um, or you can chain to an upper part, and everything below it is now no longer a signal. It's the deep signal is pretty fascinating. The problem I have is that I really don't like that last cell updated is a signal. Um, oh, um, the reason I'm doing this is I can do state, cell updated, row, and column, and that will emit on the last cell updated. Um, so now we've got a last cell updated. See, the other way I was thinking about doing this is creating um, a private bunch of callbacks, but I don't know that I want to do callbacks either. This really looks over engineered, maybe. Um, what we're trying to do is avoid going through the whole grid over and over again. Um, even here, even if I make this an observable, and this is the difficulty, right? The way it was originally written, um, this update cell value, all of these things depended on it, but guess what? They all depend on it now too. Or wait, no, the dependency went the other way. Update cell value dependent on pencil marks, and check grid for errors and things like that, right? Um, so we're trying to invert this dependency, right? Because originally update cell value depended on these two calls so that it could make them anytime the cell value was updated. Um, and maybe that's the way it has to be. Yeah, I'm trying to invert this dependency to make to make these depend on the cell value updating and not make the cell value update have to know that these need to be called. Right? I don't want update cell value to know about these. I want these to know that the cell value is updated. Um, I think we can do it with an on in it. I think we can do it with hooks, so we can bring that in. And then state, boom. And then the hooks we want, how did it not import that? We can do an on init hook. And then inside of here, we can do, so here we can add a watch cell value change. And this can be an RX method, which we'll need to import. And the RX method will be that, yep, and cell changed. Well, actually, we don't even need that. We can just pipe right away. I should be able to grab that from RxJS. And now we've got an effect that we can use. Um, so here in the on init, what we can do is we can just say, hey, state dot watch cell value changes. And inside of here, we can give it the state dot last cell update. Boom. And so now anytime this observable emits, watch cell value for changes will be called. And so now we can tap here and we can pull out our row and column. Boom. And now we can update the row and the column with changes. It's just telling me that I haven't used row and column. Oh wow, I'm way over today. I was hearing family talking in the background. I love RX method actually. It's one of my favorite methods. I use it even outside of a signal store. Um, we'll come back to this, right? Um, well, actually, we can do it pretty easily. Const, no. because what we need is we need the row equals state.rows row, and well, we can call this current row, right? Or updated row equals that, and const updated column equals that. Um, and then we need to update the rows with the values to hide. Um, so at this point, we would patch state, and then we would update the row and the column. We're going to have to go through every item in the row. So this is where we'll pick up next time, is on this. But I definitely need to end. I didn't realize I'd gone over by so far. Was having a good time with everybody. Thank you guys for showing up. Abra Loris, it's good to see you, man. I've been talking to some people about stuff that you mentioned to me. So I should have some updates for you here in a little bit. Yeah, I'm gonna start Tuesday. So the next stream I'll do is Tuesday evening. So Tuesday evening at 5:30. I'll make sure that I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. Yeah, it is really because you showed up, Auto Lores. That's really the reason why I'm like, no. I just heard my family talking in the background, and they're like, "Is Dad ever gonna stop?" And so I checked the time. I'm almost an hour over. We've got some stuff that we're gonna go do as a family, and so them asking if I'm ever going to end is kind of them wondering when we're gonna go do some stuff. So, yeah, dude, anytime you show up, I'm gonna end. No, it's not true, but thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. But yeah, you guys have a great rest of your weekend, however much is left. And we'll see you Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time, where we will finish this up. This stuff was the most difficult stuff to reason about, and I see why I did it the way I did it now. I thought I was being clever, but I need to realize that when I think I'm being clever, I'm probably not as smart as I think I am. But you guys have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.